good evening, everyone. And now I'm starting straight away with the presentation. Heritage survives unevenly. We all know that. Some places they thrive, some survive, some are forgotten. This talk is about why. There are sites that survive visibly. Those sites with crowd, funding, protection, recognition, places the world still returns to. Because before we understand forgotten heritage, first we need to understand why some heritage survives at all. This is thriving heritage. It is so easy to recognize. It is lit, it is maintained, it is visited, protected, not because it is old, because it still matters. Amer Fort again. But now look at the courtyard. Heritage survives when people keep arriving. Divaniyam, Amer Fort. This is thriving heritage because it is not just preserved, it is maintained, cleaned, repaired, lit. The building still has caretakers. Sheesh Mahal, Amer Fort, perhaps the most photographed interior in Rajasthan. Every surface maintained, every detail preserved. Heritage survives when it continues to matter. Varanasi, thriving heritage not always architectural. Sometimes it survives as ritual, repeated night after night. As long as people gather, the tradition stays alive. Kashi Vishwanath Corridor in Varanasi, thriving heritage adapts. New stone, old faith. The architecture changes, the pilgrimage remains. Sarnath, thriving heritage is not always monumental. Sometimes it survives through association. The Buddha preached here. That memory alone keeps the site alive. And no, this is not Dhamek Stupa. This is what survives around it. Layers, foundations, excavation. Heritage is rarely one monument. It is usually an entire landscape of memory. The Kumbh Mela, temporary, completely temporary, and yet one of the oldest continuing cultural gatherings on earth. Heritage does not survive because stone survives. It survives because participation survives. I needed two aerials to make this argument. From the ground, you see a crowd. From here, you see a civilization expressing itself at full volume. Scale is the story, and scale requires distance. Khajuraho, Madhya Pradesh, 950 to 1050 CE, the Chandela dynasty's greatest achievement. Most visitors come for the erotic sculpture. That represents roughly 10% of all the carvings here. 10%. Yes, this. The cameras stop here. The tour guides, they stop here. And yes, this is extraordinary, but this is theology, not titillation. These figures belong to the outermost layer of a much larger vision of the divine. The sensory world at the edge, moving inward toward the divine. The erotic is the entry point, not the destination. The remaining 90%, gods, devotees, musicians, dancers, court life, processions, everyday existence, an entire civilization carved into stone. Most visitors, they never see it because they stop exactly one layer too early. The Chandelas built 85 temples here. 25 survived, 60 disappeared. Not to invasion, to neglect, and stone reuse. Khajuraho survived because in 1838, a British Army engineer named T.S. Burt stumbled upon it again. Heritage survives when someone decides it is still worth looking at. The in between, not forgotten, not fully alive either. Places with visitors, some funding, some recognition, but weak patronage or the wrong kind of patronage. Heritage survives on continuity, not sentiment. These are the fragile sites because everyone assumes someone else is taking care of them. Ramappa Temple, this is in Telangana. It's about 65 kilometers from Warangal. It was built in 1213 CE. It was not named after a king or a priest or a deity. It was actually named after its architect, Ramappa. This is rare for an Indian temple, and the engineering is just as remarkable. The Shikhara, the Shikhara uses lightweight floating bricks, but the real innovation is below the ground. The entire temple stands on a sandbox foundation designed to absorb seismic shock. A structural marvel, now a UNESCO site. And yet, because it lies far from India's main tourist circuits, Ramappa still receives only a trickle of visitors. Heritage does not disappear all at once. Sometimes it survives magnificently and quietly. Here is the proof. Look at the stone platform, uneven, shifted by centuries of earthquakes, exactly as the builder intended. The foundation absorbed the shock, the temple survived, and the platform recorded that movement. 800 years later, the engineering is still working. But unlike the great temple cities, the crowd never really arrived here, which makes the silence almost part of the experience. The interior, look at the columns. Everything is ordered, measured, controlled, and yet the space never feels rigid. The carvings keep changing, small details appear as you move. You don't see it all at once. The hall slowly reveals itself. It is precise engineering, but it still feels deeply human. And very often you experience spaces like this almost alone. Black basalt, one of the hardest stones a sculptor can work with. Difficult to carve, it is unforgiving, and yet look at those grooves. A strand of grass passes through them. The carving is so precise that nature itself becomes the measuring scale. This is not decoration, this is masonry. The craftsmanship survived. The recognition finally arrived. But mass tourism still hasn't. Ramappa exists in that strange middle ground, not forgotten, but not fully alive either. 50 years before Ramappa, same dynasty, same region, the Thousand Pillars temples at Hanamkonda, still Kakatiya, still extraordinary. But look at the Shikhara, flat, heavy, conventional kind of stone construction. The floating bricks are not there yet. They haven't arrived. The seismic foundation system is not there yet. You're looking at the generation before the breakthrough. Same civilization, just 50 years apart, and the leap in engineering is not visible yet. The same black basalt, the same Kakatiya craftsmen. Look at the detailing, the jewelry, the surface finish, the precision of the carving. This is not lesser workmanship than Ramappa. What changed was recognition. Ramappa became UNESCO. This remained regional, which tells us something important. Heritage survives not only through craftsmanship, but through documentation, advocacy, and political attention. Visibility is also conservation. Shapora Fort, North Goa, built in 1617 by Adil Shah of Bijapur. It was at that time called Shahpura. The Portuguese couldn't pronounce it, so Shahpura became Shapora. Sometimes history disappears through language. Four powers held this fort, each rewrote the story. But most people know it today as the fort from Dil Chahta Hai. A 2001 film outweighs 4 centuries of history. Hadi Rani Ki Bauli, Toda Rai Singh, Rajasthan. A building that goes down instead of up. Architecture designed around water scarcity. The boys swimming here aren't thinking about heritage, they're thinking about the heat, which is exactly what the architect intended. Most visitors come from the legend of a queen who sent her severed head to her husband on their wedding night so he's not distracted from the battle he is in. But the real marvel is the engineering. Paheli, the 2005 Shah Rukh Khan film, was shot here. It gives this stepwell the only real public visibility. Without that film, Hadi Rani Ki Baudi would remain almost unknown beyond the district. A Queen's Legend, a Bollywood film. That is the entire public memory sustaining one of Rajasthan's finest architectural work. This must be familiar for Khaki team. Mumbai, the gateway of India, protected, used, loved, and still unresolved. A colonial monument in a post colonial city. Mumbai never fully rejected it, but it never fully embraced it either, which is why it belongs to the in between. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Terminus, built in 1887 as Victoria Terminus. The structure, it was renamed in 1996. It has survived. Its identity has changed. This photograph was taken during COVID lockdown. No traffic, almost no people. Mumbai briefly looked like old Bombay again. Uh, like in the 50s. That is why I chose black and white. That is why I chose black and white, not for nostalgia, but it seemed a different era had come and started to share the same frame. Briefly emptied of the present, still central to the city, but no longer central to its imagination. Act 2, surviving. These sites should not exist actually, by every reasonable historical calculation. Invasion, abandonment, deliberate destruction, simply time, they should be rubble. They are not. And in every case, the reason is different. Sometimes engineering, sometimes faith, isolation, accident, sheer scale, sometimes because a few people refuse to let go. This act is about that question. Why are some places still here at all? Chittorgarh, Rajasthan, 691 acres, the largest fort in India. Three great sieges, 1303, 1535, 1568. Alauddin Khilji, Bahadur Shah of Gujarat, Akbar. Each time taken by force, each time Johar, each time the defenders rode out to die. And yet the fort still dominates the landscape while the living city moved down to the plains below. Power abandoned the hill. Memory did not. You begin to understand why Chittorgarh survived when you see the terrain. The hill itself is a fortress. Cliffs, walls, water, distance. This was never meant to be taken easily. But survival is not just military. Look closely. If you check out the slide, the temples, they still function. People still climb here. The fort is no longer a capital, but it is still inhabited by memory. Ajanta, Maharashtra, 2nd century BCE to 5th century CE. 30 Buddhist cave monasteries, cut into a hidden horseshoe gorge. Look carefully at the landscape. You do not accidentally arrive here. When Buddhism declined in India, the trade routes shifted, the monks left, and the jungle took everything back. For nearly 1400 years, Ajanta vanished so completely the goats grazed above it, without anyone below remembering what the mountain contained. Rediscovered in 1819, not by archaeologists, by accident. A British officer named John Smith, while out on a tiger hunt, was shown the cliff face by a local shepherd boy. And when he entered Cave 10, he did something painfully familiar. He carved his own name into it. The graffiti is still there. So are the caves. Ajanta survived first because the world forgot it, then because the modern world would it noticed it just in time. Same site, same century, same faith, but two different survival stories. The stone cave still stands almost intact. The painting is it is fading in front of us. Colors weaken, surfaces crack, humidity, breath, time, all working slowly against it. Ajanta survived the loss of Buddhism. It may not survive tourism the same way. Even inside a single monument, some things are more mortal than the others. Just take a water break. The Kailasha temple, not built, excavated. Everything you see here, the courtyard, the shrine, the pillar, the bridgeways, even the freestanding Dhwaja Stambh, all of it was once solid mountain. The architects did not carve into the rock. They removed the rock around the temple, top down. No second chances, one mistake, and the mountain itself would expose it forever. This is not construction. This is subtraction at civilizational scale. An estimated 230,000 tons of basalt was removed, top down, one irreversible cut at a time. No architectural drawings survive, no corrected drafts, no room for error, and yet the vision held across dynasties, across generations, across the death of the original craftsman. For over 2 centuries, the mountain kept yielding to the same idea. Every surface became narrative. Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranic cosmology, story upon story cut into living basalt. No visitor was ever meant to absorb all of this at once. The temple exceeds human scale, human attention, perhaps even human time. It was not built to impress visitors. It was built as an offering. From above, that logic becomes visible. This is Cave 16, the Kailasha temple, commissioned in the 8th century by Rashtrakuta king Krishna I. But no king completes something like this alone. The real achievement is continuity, a vision passed forward across generations of builders. That is what sustained patronage can produce. Ellora has 34 caves. Most visitors see one. Kailasha overwhelms them. Everything around it becomes peripheral. But look here, the carving here is assured, the imagery sophisticated, the workmanship fully alive. But then, a masterpiece beside a masterpiece can still become invisible. Not every cave becomes Kailasha. Some survive in the margins, a corridor, a few standing figures, light fading into stone, still sacred, still beautiful, still overlooked. And even the workmanship changes. The caves closest to power received the finest labor. The peripheral spaces often did not. not because the craftsmen lacked skill, but because the patron was unlikely to come here. The logic still survives, the center gets attention, edges slowly disappear. Hampi or Vijayanagar at its peak, one of the largest cities in the world. Then Talikota, four Islamic states attacked Vijayanagar in 1565. The empire fell, the patronage vanished, and construction stopped mid sentence. This stone chariot was never completed. It has remained unfinished for nearly 5 centuries, not ruined, interrupted. But Hampi did not entirely die. Some shrines never stopped breathing, a dressed deity, fresh offerings, the yantra still garlanded, and now a new patronage is emerging. Not imperial, not colonial, not archaeological, mythic. Hampi is being reimagined as Kishkindha, the landscape of the Ramayana, because living faith can protect heritage more powerfully than nostalgia ever can. Ugra Narsimha, Vishnu as fury. The figure of Lakshmi once seated on his lap was destroyed after 1565. What survives is rage without tenderness. The damage itself became part of the sculpture. Even now, the wound remains visible. Two Ganeshas, both monolithic, but their names did not come from kings or priests. Kadale Kalu Ganesha, I'm sorry if my pronunciation is off because I am not a Kannada speaking person. So, Kadale Kalu Ganesha, named after black gram, and Sasive Kalu Ganesha, named after mustard seed. Ordinary people named them, but they named them through the language of kitchen. And somehow that makes these colossal idols feel strangely close. Champaner Pavagadh in Gujarat, the Jami Masjid, late 15th century, built under Mahmud Begada of the Gujarat Sultanate. Many scholars consider it the finest pre Mughal mosque in India. Look at the columns, the brackets, the carvings. The craftsmen who built the mosque already knew the architectural language of Western India. And you can feel that in the stone itself. You're standing beneath a dome that no longer exists. The roof collapsed, the circle remained. The columns still hold the geometry together, even after the architecture above them disappeared. Sometimes ruins become beautiful by accident. And this entire city remained a capital for just 23 years. Built at enormous scale. Then Humayun arrived in 1535, and almost immediately the experiment collapsed. One of the most ambitious urban projects in India's history, abandoned within one generation. Udaygiri, Madhya Pradesh, early 5th century CE, Gupta period. Vishnu reclining on the serpent Sheshnag, one of the earliest surviving monumental images of this idea in Indian art. And yet, it already feels fully formed, confident, certain. 6 kilometers from Vidisha, 13 from Sanchi, and almost nobody comes here. The Varaha panel, Vishnu lifting the earth goddess Bhudevi. But this is not just religion. The Gupta rulers were placing themselves inside a sacred story. Chandragupta too is named nearby in an inscription. And this is one of the earliest moments where political power and Hindu sacred imagery come together at a monumental scale. Now, Act 3, forgotten, not abandoned by local people. Many of these places are still worshipped, still lived around, still remembered. I mean, forgotten by the system that decides what gets funded, protected, promoted, and told to the world. Forgotten by tourism, forgotten by the state, and slowly, perhaps, they disappear. Moshi, they write it as Moxie, but it's Moshi in South Goa, along the Kushavati River. These petroglyphs may be 20 to 30,000 years old, older than the Indus Valley civilization, older than farming. They all sit out there on exposed river rock, almost unnoticed. No museum glass, no dramatic lighting, no crowds, just some of the oldest human marks in India lying beside a river in Goa. Goa. And immediately, most people picture beaches, bars, Portuguese churches. But Goa's history goes much further back. These are the Harvalim caves, 5th to 6th century CE, cut into laterite rock more than 1,000 years before the Portuguese arrived. Goa was already old before the version we sell to the tourists even existed. This linga is no longer an active shrine, but carved into the stone are inscriptions in Brahmi script. That matters. Brahmi is among the earliest writing systems of Indian subcontinent, which means this cave is not just old. It has been carrying written memory for more than 1500 years. And yet, almost nobody outside Goa has heard of Harvalim. Fort Aguada, built by the Portuguese in 1612. Most visitors come here for the lighthouse, the prison, or the sea view. But the enormous structure in the center of the is the real reason the fort existed. It is a freshwater storage tank, one of the most sophisticated water systems the Portuguese built in India. It was designed to supply ships sailing the Arabian Sea, an engineering project hidden in plain sight. Nobody sees this when they go to Aguada. Aguada jail, below Fort Aguada, not the fort itself, a colonial defense site became a prison, first under the Portuguese, then after liberation under the Indian state. It remained Goa's main jail until 2015, as recent as that. Now they're turning it into a museum, which is probably the best retirement plan a prison can have. Gagron Fort, Jhalawar, Rajasthan. A fort surrounded by water on three sides, built at the confluence of the Ahu and Kalisen River. As part of the same UNESCO listing as Amer, Chittorgarh, Kumbhalgarh, Ranthambore, and Jaisalmer. Same UNESCO badge, very different crowds. Some monuments they become destinations, others they remain discoveries. The Ramburj Gagron Fort, a curved rampart built for artillery. Cannons could be moved quickly along the edge, depending on where the attack came from. You can still read the military thinking in the architecture, and yet almost nobody talks about Gagron, even despite the fact that the fort witnessed two Johars and a history is as violent as Chittorgarh's. Some places become legends, some remain local memory. Back to Hampi, but not the grand monuments this time. A small shrine built around a natural boulder. This is Madan Mahal, Jabalpur, early 12th century. Earlier at Hampi, we saw temples merging into boulders. Here, the same instinct appears in a completely different kingdom. The Gond rulers, the Gond builders did not fight the landscape, they used it. The palace grows out of the rock as if the hill itself decided to become architecture. Inside Madan Mahal, the rock is still present. Rooms and passages wrap themselves around it with surprising precision. This was a royal complex from a dynasty that ruled central India for centuries. And yet, today, most Indians barely know that Gond dynasty existed. We were never taught that. This is something interesting. Bateshwar, Morena district, Madhya Pradesh. Bateshwar Mahadev. Over 200 temples, 8th to 10th century, Gurjar Pratihara period. For decades, these temples lay collapsed. A, these were in Chambal ravines. They were inside a dacoit territory. And then came one of the strangest restoration stories in Indian archaeology. Dr. K.K. Mohammed and the ASI team began rebuilding the complex, stone by fallen stone, like a giant 3D jigsaw puzzle. You know, no drawings, no original plans, just the internal logic of the architecture itself. And here is a detail that sounds fictional, but it is true. The restoration could proceed only because a Chambal dacoit named Nirbhay Gujjar, he gave Dr. K.K. Mohammed's team safe passage and protection in the ravines. So these temples survived through an unlikely partnership, an ASI archaeologist and a man the police were hunting. One rebuilding the temples, the other making sure nobody stopped him from doing it. Mubarak Mandi complex, Jammu, royal palace of Dogra rulers built over several centuries. And look at the architecture: Rajput forms, Mughal arches, European detailing, Sikh decorative influences, all layered onto the same building. This is not one style, it is an architectural record of everything that passed through Dogra court. Parts of this palace are collapsing in plain sight, not because the structure is weak, but because maintenance stopped. Government offices occupied sections of the complex for decades, altering spaces, neglecting repairs, treating a royal palace like ordinary real estate. What you see here is not ruin caused by age alone. It is administrative decay made visible. And then there is the ceiling work, the papier mache ornamentation, part of a Kashmiri craft tradition that very few people still practice at this level. This is the frightening part of heritage loss. Sometimes the building survives, but the knowledge required to restore it disappears first. Revdanda Fort, Maharashtra. This is where Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj laid the foundations of the Maratha Navy. One decision here would reshape power along the entire western coast, India's entire western Konkan coast. Today, almost nothing here feels like a fort. The village has absorbed it. Homes stand inside the walls. Vegetation covers the rest. Only this entrance arch still announces that something important once stood here. 5 kilometers from Devdanda, Korlai Fort, Portuguese, 1521. Shivaji Maharaj took fort after fort along the Konkan coast, but not this one. Korlai held, and something else survived here too. The descendants of the Portuguese garrison still live nearby. Some still speak Korlai Creole, one of the last Portuguese based languages in Asia. The fort is fading, the language is fading. Sometimes heritage disappears in more than one way. Mitauli, Morena district, Madhya Pradesh. 10th, 11th century, a circular open to sky yogini temple. 64 niches for the yoginis, one for Shakti. And this hilltop shrine quietly influenced one of the most important buildings in modern India. Edwin Lutyens is believed to have visited this temple while designing New Delhi. Its circular plan, radiating chambers, and open center later echoed in India's old Parliament House. Not a bad model to borrow. The temple had already survived nearly 1,000 years and multiple earthquakes. So, this tantric shrine became part of the architectural story of modern Indian democracy. Many of the Yogini figures are gone, not through one dramatic act of theft, but slowly over generations, taken into village shrines, folded into local worship. The goddesses did not disappear; they simply moved closer to the people. They were near Jabalpur. Another 64 Yogini or 64 Yogini temple. Unlike Mitauli, this one is rectangular. Today, worship continues, but in the Shiva shrine. Tripuri, once the Kalashuri capital, the temple survived. The city was forgotten. The peripheral corridor, some yogini figures are still surviving in their niches. Around them, empty spaces where the others once stood. Not one dramatic act of destruction, just disappearance. One figure at a time, over centuries. Presence, absence, both are part of the story now. Mandu, Madhya Pradesh. The tomb of Hoshang Shah, Sultan of Malwa. It was completed in 1440. The first major marble tomb in India, almost 2 centuries before the Taj Mahal. Before Shah Jahan built the Taj, he sent his architects here. They wanted to study this building. And their visit is recorded as an inscription on the tomb itself here. This quiet monument in Mandu became one of the architectural ancestors of Taj Mahal. The interior of Hushang Shah tomb, the marble, the proportions, the filtered light through the arches. This is not an early experiment leading towards the Taj Mahal. It is already a masterpiece, and outside this chamber lies Mandu, monument after monument, spread quietly across the plateau. The economic truth. Everything tonight has been building to this. Champaner is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but recognition alone does not preserve heritage. Without people returning to it, restoration slows, attention fades, and neglect returns. The patterns may have changed. The economics of heritage has not. UNESCO recognition helped Ramappa. More people now know about the temple, but recognition alone is not enough. The real transformation happens when a site becomes part of a living travel circuit, visited, photographed, spoken about, returned to. That is how heritage survives across generations. Varanasi never fell out of circulation. Pilgrims keep returning. Rituals continued. The river remained central to daily life. And now, new infrastructure, new investment, new visibility. They are refreshing the city once again. Living heritage survives because every generation finds a reason to keep it alive. Heritage doesn't die because people stop caring. It dies because people stop benefiting. The question is not which sites deserve to be remembered. The question is who benefits from remembering them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ajay. What a beautiful presentation. And of course, first of all, my compliments for such a delightful collection of photographs that, some of these, many of these places, many of us have not visited. And many of these places, the views that you have shown, I visited the Kumbh, but certainly did not get the aerial view that you've managed to get. So, absolutely stunning collection of pictures. But much more than that, the entire thought process of putting this presentation and telling and sort of breaking down between thriving and surviving and forgotten, and of course quite a few questions in everyone's heads, I'm sure. Mine to begin with is that there is this very delicate balance between what is thriving. For instance, to me, the Red Fort is absolutely thriving because it's not only this great, not only is it a part of the past, but it's also a part of the present because people are literally, still in that place. But a couple of things. One, that it runs the risk, the present runs the risk of damaging the past because it's so much in use. And who is to say how much they can use, because it is there. After all, they've lived there continuously over years. And again, we see that in Banganga in Bombay, where people have been living there for the last 1,000 years, and it sort of takes away from the past because, like you showed, stones from the old temples get used into the new, and who's going to stop that? How does that get managed and balanced? And my other point is that how do you draw when there are too many people, when there are too many visitors, does that not also damage the structure? So what are your thoughts on that?
Um, Let me take the second one first.
Sure.
When there are too many people, you manage them by having a box office,
Higher tickets, yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
and by raising the prices if they are still too many,
Hmm.
like Taj Mahal has done.
Absolutely.
Foreigners who visit, they have to pay something like $750. That's the last I know. Maybe they've upped it again. I have no idea.
Hmm.
So I'm saying that that's one way of doing it. The other is, see, the entire deal about heritage is the economic story.
Hmm.
See, if people continue to benefit, it is in their interest to then ensure that that heritage survives. It's not damaged.
Hmm.
It remains, it, as they say, वो दुधारू गाय बोलते हैं हिंदी में,
Correct.
a
Yeah.
cow that gives milk.
Correct.
So that is very important for any heritage to remain relevant. I went to Israel and went to a place called Akko or Acre. It's a, 14th, those Crusades times fortress is there.
Hmm.
It had already been kind of, it had to be excavated. It's now
Hmm.
half excavated. So the entire city, it's not a city, it's a small town, but the economics of the entire place
Hmm.
are driven by that fortress.
Hmm.
So what they've done is not just they're milking it. So what they've done is they have a ticketed thing which is 50 shekels for a normal visit. But you have a royal dinner where there is a make-believe king, make-believe darbar, etc. And for that, they have ticketed it to 300 shekels. So they are milking it more. So I'm saying, what stops us from milking our Red Fort? People will pay an arm and a leg if royal dinner is organized there.
Absolutely.
So I'm
Absolutely.
saying these are the thoughts I have. Sorry, go on.
Agree. Agree. No, also, there's so much more than just the conservation of that. Some of the places that you've mentioned, uh, because there needs to be an entire ecosystem. There needs to be place for people to come and stay. There need to be, road routes or train routes or whatever, which makes access easily available. That will certainly make the, communities sort of create more, sell stuff and do tour, sort of do tours or whatever. So I guess we are lacking in those as well in some of these places, not having connectivity and not having accommodation and sort of stay for our guests. So lots of compliments for your talk. People I know, Usha has mentioned. I think you were talking about the prison in Goa, and she said that now it's a lovely museum, the Fort Aguada, and the guided tours really bring out the narratives. Dr. Vivek Mendonca says that he really appreciates your sense of humor, and that makes your talk very interesting. Jyoti says that she's heard about, but she really found the dacoit and jumble support very interesting. And So lots of compliments. Jatin says that great visual storytelling, and he's glad that he's sort of visited some of these places, but lovely to see it through your eyes and perspective. And of course, everyone's much appreciated your last sentence that places are forgotten not because people don't care, but because they stop benefiting from it. So lots of that. There is a Kirti has said that your point on the assimilation of the heritage structures into the present living was interesting. He says it's a double-edged sword because it does help in the survival of those structures, not just get dilapidated, but at times it can also be destroyed.
Just one sec. Somebody just commented that it has been turned, Mithali, or sorry, one of the
Adil has.
Chauncet Yogini temples has been converted into Shiva temple. No, it is not the case. Chauncet Yogini temples always
Mm,
have Chauncet Yogini and Shakti in the peripheral corridor,
mm,
and the central uh, domed temple, the temple with Shikhara, is always a Shiva temple. So this
mm.
is something which we need to remember. Sorry,
I
go
think what
on.
he's trying to say is that a shivling has been installed in each of the 64 yogini shrines.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
He says, Adil goes on to say that the Morena's Parvali temples are a beautiful sight to see, and the Bateshwar temple complex that has been restored very nicely for many decades with the support of the uh, dacoit. Yeah, so I think what Kirti has been saying is that on one side the structures get dilapidated because people are living there and they can be destroyed because of the activity of the people, but on the other side, getting people to stay there helps those structures get the traction. So that's a double-edged sword, really, of
It
any
is.
of the living heritage that we see around us. Some places you can see it. I mean, literally in Turkey and in Rome, you people are really living with the heritage, but perhaps with a little bit more regard for what they treat as.
What I shared today is not just relevant to heritage in India.
Hmm.
Globally, it is the same story.
Hmm. That is true. That is true. Um, Dr. Vivek Mendonça says that something he's written about visited category complex only main mausoleum. I'm not able to get the chart. I think he's sent in some pricing
Okay.
for. Yeah. Okay, so I think he's sent the rates for the Taj Mahal, the
Oh, okay.
chart.
Now they've been upped again. That's what
Yeah,
he's saying.
he's
Yeah.
saying that it's now, yeah, 1,000 and yeah.
Okay.
Lovely. I think that you've really given us visual delight and a lot of food for thought about our heritage, and I really hope that more of these places get onto the circuit in terms of more people, more footfalls, more memories being created by everyone with more photographs and so on. But thank you very much for taking us on this journey today, Ajay. Thank you very much. And thank you to all our audience. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy your Saturday evening. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.